Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Greg Stewart, and this is week 4 in a video series I am doing to promote my book, I Cubed, Unlocking the Inner Strength Behind Our Negative Emotions, coming out spring of 2025. Question: if you woke up tomorrow and everything in your life was absolutely perfect, what would be different? When you immediately start to answer that question in your mind, you're probably going to first think of things that would be different in your life, things outside of you, right? Things that you would have a higher standard of living, you would have better relationships or what have you. And some of you probably immediately thought about what would be different about you personally, that you would be different by having different habits, different choices, being more successful in this way or that way, which is fine. But what we need to do is immediately start dividing things into 2 columns, those things we have control over and those things that we do not have control over. And for a bit, we have to just grab all those items that are in our life that we don't have control over, but it'd be great if it was different, and set those aside because we don't have control over those things. It's all about control, isn't it? Right? So we want to control as much as we can, but our ultimate outcome is what? What's the ultimate outcome? Honestly, it's just a better emotional experience in life. We can call that quality of life. We can call that standard of living, whatever you want to call it. It's certainly we want to experience a better life. But there are basically what I divided into is a macro and micro. We want to experience a better quality of life in the micro, which is the here and now experience every single day, day in and day out. But there's a macro experience, which has to do with our quality of life overall, standard of living. But in our quality of life, we don't just define that as our standard of living. We mean by quality of life are those deeper elements of peace and satisfaction and rest. So all those are our emotional goals, but in a micro and a macro way. So the emotional goals are good, as I stated, but the paths we take to achieve the emotional goals aren't always good. So this week, I want to give you a new grid by which to start evaluating these paths. We'll give some examples. So every emotional goal is good, but some of the paths we take to achieve that micro emotional goal, like, getting away from conflict or experiencing less anxiety, or the macro goals of achieving a higher standard of living, are not good. Some of those paths are not rational. If we basically are sarcastic in our responses, or if we don't respond correctly to a situation, or if we choose unethical paths to achieve our greater quality of life, it doesn't pass the test of rational, healthy, wise, and right. So here are some examples. So if we're trying to achieve the emotional goal of decreasing our stress, some people, what do? They choose the path of drinking alcohol after work. The emotional goal is good, but the pathway they're taking to achieve that emotional goal is not healthy. What about if we're trying to promote truth, like we're going to speak the truth to people, but we have no grace or understanding with the person that we're promoting truth with? Or honestly, if we are trying to be empathic and graceful to people, but we're not giving them the truth that they need to hear, right? So the goal is for change behavior, or the goal is to maintain peace in the relationship, but the paths we take or don't take are not wise. What if we are trying to achieve the emotional goal of feeling love, but the path we're taking is with somebody who is not our spouse? What if we're trying to achieve the emotional goal of peace, but we choose the path of avoiding necessary conflict? What if we want to achieve the emotional goal of rest, but our pathway is hitting the snooze button 7 or 8 times before we get up in the morning? What if our emotional goal is to be happy, but we choose the path of avoiding homework? So if you woke up tomorrow and everything about you was different and you loved it, what would be different? So start thinking through choices and habits, and those choices and habits are the paths. So the paths are habits, choices, responses, behaviors, and the like, in order to achieve very, very legitimate emotional goals. So first, what I want you to do is start listing with each of the behaviors you want to change, behaviors, responses, choices, habits that you want to change about yourself. With each of them, what emotional goal are you trying to achieve when you make that choice, when you have that response? when you have this habit? What emotional goal are you trying to achieve? And once you see the emotional goal linked to the path, the choice, the habit, the response, the habit, then come up with several other options in order to have available to you in order to achieve the same emotional goal. Likewise, the second technique would be to also realize that there are always multiple goals. The emotional goal you have to be happy by playing video games, which is not wrong, but you also have the other goal of having confidence and satisfaction by completing your homework. There's always two emotional goals probably happening at the same time. If you want to have peace by not arguing with your spouse, you also have the goal of peace and fulfillment by walking through true and legitimate problems with your spouse effectively. Two paths in order to achieve, multiple goals. You also might want to decrease stress, which is a good thing, but you also want to achieve the goal of peace by not abusing alcohol. So we have to break everything down, as I've said, from the emotional goals we're trying to achieve and the paths we're choosing that are not rational, healthy, wise, or right. So we have to look at these things, our responses that are not rational or our responses that are not healthy. If the choices we make are not wise or honestly just plain wrong. What about our habits? Our habits are probably falling into the unhealthy category and could be unwise and wrong and irrational. But you have to kind of be honest with yourself, saying that each of these paths that I take are not rational, healthy, wise, or right. And also, after you go through a difficult experience that kind of just happened really quickly, let's say an argument with someone, what about the sentences, your responses that you said in that argument that weren't rational, but they came automatically from our mental models, which I'll address. I just started talking about that last week. So what if those responses that were automatic are not rational, but you see a pattern there? You're making a lot of irrational statements or belief or have irrational responses, or that the way you express yourself is unhealthy, but it just happens automatically. What do you do about that if it's habitual in nature? And in this process, as I walk you through, we're going to kind of face the fact that a lot of the responses, choices, habits we have are not rational. They're irrational, actually. They're unhealthy, they're unwise, or they're just plain wrong. But we have to, in order to start the process, is separate the emotional goal, because sometimes we validate the path we take because we're focusing only on the emotional goal we're trying to achieve. So we hold on to this irrational, unhealthy, unwise path or wrong path in order to achieve a very good emotional goal. And we have to separate them and own the fact that, hey, my emotional goal is good, but I have to be honest and say that my paths do not pass the rational, healthy, wise, and right grid. So everything we do is trying to achieve an emotional goal. And the things that bring us the greatest amount of peace and satisfaction and confidence are the paths, the behaviors, habits, responses that are rational, healthy, wise, and right. All right. We'll see you next week.